Commander sat in his office at Earth Defense Headquarters when the message arrived. The holographic display lit up with symbols he had seen only a few times before. It was from the Galactic Federation, and it was marked urgent. 3 years had passed since humanity met alien life. 3 years since Earth learned it was not alone in the universe. The Federation welcomed Earth, but everyone knew the truth. Humans were at the bottom. Every other species had thousands of years of space travel. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had warriors who trained for centuries because they lived so long. Earth had none of that. Opened the message and listened. A tall alien made of crystal spoke in perfect English, translated by Federation computers. His name was, and he was the head of the War Council. Earth has been selected to participate in the proving grounds, said. His voice echoed like glass bells. Every member species must send a champion to fight. This is how we test the worth of warriors. This is how we know who deserves respect. Felt his stomach tighten. He knew about the proving grounds. Warriors from across the galaxy fought in combat trials. Species proved their strength there, but Earth had only been in space for 3 years. How could they compete with aliens who had been fighting wars for? Continued, and his tone made it clear what he thought of humans. We understand Earth is limited. Your soldiers use primitive bullets. Your people live less than 100 years, so they cannot train properly. Your bodies are fragile and weak, but rules are rules. Every species must participate. The crystal alien actually laughed. Other Federation members appeared on the screen behind him, and some of them laughed too. A four-armed reptile grinned with too many teeth. An insect-like creature clicked in what might have been amusement. Send whoever you wish, said. We will try not to let them die too quickly. The proving grounds begin in 1 month. Do try to give us some entertainment. The message ended. Sat in silence for a long moment. Then he started making calls. Within hours, every important military leader on Earth gathered in the command center. General arrived first, a stern man who had commanded special forces for 20 years. Admiral came next, the head of Earth's small space fleet. Others followed until the room was full. They are mocking us, said after watching the message. They think we are a joke. We might be, someone else muttered. How can we fight aliens who have been warriors for thousands of years? Some of them have natural weapons, armor, or powers we cannot match. We send our best special forces team, suggested. Show them what human training can do. They will still be using human bodies, pointed out. Against aliens who might be 3 times as strong or fast. Against beings who can manipulate energy or survive wounds that would kill us. The argument went back and forth. Some wanted to send soldiers with the best technology. Others thought maybe Earth should refuse and accept whatever punishment the Federation gave. No one had a good answer. Then an old man cleared his throat. Everyone turned to look at. He was over 70 years old and served as a special advisor. Most people thought he was just a historian, someone who remembered how things used to be. They let him attend meetings out of respect, but rarely listened to his ideas. Before we had guns, said quietly, humans were still warriors. Before we had bombs or missiles or spacecraft, we still fought wars. And we became very, very good at it. What are you suggesting? Asked. I am suggesting we send a warrior from the old times. Someone who fights the way humans fought for thousands of years, before we relied on technology. Several people laughed. One general shook his head. You want to send someone with a sword against aliens with energy weapons. That is suicide. I want to send someone who has trained their entire life in combat, said calmly. Someone who knows hundreds of ways to kill, to hide, to strike without warning. Someone who understands that the greatest weapon is not in your hand but in your mind. Those warriors do not exist anymore, said, though she sounded less certain. Smiled slightly. You are wrong, Admiral. They exist. They have always existed, hidden in training, keeping the old ways alive. I know because my daughter is one of them." The room went very quiet. "Explain," said. Stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below, at the modern buildings and flying cars and all the technology of the new age. In the mountains of Japan, there is a place no satellite can find. A valley where a small group of people have lived for 800 years, maybe longer. They keep themselves hidden from the world. They practice arts that most people think are just stories. They are, and they are very real. "Ninjas," someone said with disbelief. "You are talking about ninjas." "I am talking about warriors who have refined combat into an art form," said firmly. "Who can move without sound, strike without warning, and defeat enemies who should be stronger than them. My daughter married into this clan 30 years ago. Her name is, and she is their finest warrior." "This is insane," said, but he did not sound entirely convinced. "Is it?" Turned back to face them. "The Federation expects us to send someone with human technology fighting in a human way. They expect someone they can predict and defeat easily. What if we send someone they cannot understand? Someone who fights in ways they have never seen?" Thought about it. The old man had a point. Every species in the Federation fought with either advanced technology or natural abilities. None of them would expect ancient human combat techniques. It might actually work. "Can you contact this clan?" asked. "I can take you there," said. "But it is not easy. They do not trust outsiders, even family. We will have to convince them that this matters." "Then we leave tomorrow," decided. "If your daughter is as good as you say, she might be Earth's only chance." The meeting ended. Most of the military leaders left shaking their heads, thinking it was a foolish plan, but trusted his instincts. Something about confidence made him believe. That night he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the proving grounds, about the aliens who laughed at humanity, about's mocking voice saying humans were weak and primitive. Maybe primitive was exactly what they needed. Maybe the old ways were better than anyone remembered. The journey took 3 days, and flew to Japan, then drove to a small village at the base of a mountain range. From there, they walked. No vehicles could go where they needed to go. No technology would help them find what they were looking for. Led the way up narrow paths that barely existed. Sometimes could not even see a trail, but the old man walked with confidence. They carried packs with food and water, climbing higher and higher into the mountains. The modern world disappeared behind them. On the second day, started to wonder if this was all a mistake. His legs hurt. His military training kept him in good shape, but this was different. Despite being over 70, moved like he had walked these paths 1,000 times before. "How much further?" asked during a rest. "That depends on when they decide to meet us," said cryptically. "What do you mean?" "They have been watching us since we left the village. They know we are coming. They will reveal themselves when they are ready." Looked around but saw nothing except trees and rocks. No movement, no signs of life. But something made the hair on his neck stand up. The feeling of being watched. On the third day she appeared. One moment and were walking through a forest. The next, a figure stood in the middle of the path ahead of them. Had not heard anything. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, nothing. She was just there as if she had grown from the shadows between the trees. She wore dark clothing that seemed to blend with the forest. A mask covered the lower half of her face. Her eyes watched them with complete calm. His hand moved toward the small pistol at his hip before he even thought about it. "That would be unwise," the woman said. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly. "You would be dead before you touched it." Bowed respectfully. "My daughter, it is good to see you." The woman pulled down her mask, revealing her face. She looked about 30, with strong features and eyes that missed nothing. This was "Father," she said, her expression softening slightly. "You bring a stranger to our lands. This has not happened in many years." "I would not do so without great need," replied. "May we speak with Master?" Studied for a long moment. He felt like she was reading everything about him, his training, his weaknesses, how dangerous he might be. It was uncomfortable being examined so thoroughly without a word being spoken. "Come," she finally said, "but you must wear blindfolds." They tied cloth over their eyes, took their arms and guided them. The walk lasted about an hour and quickly lost all sense of direction. He heard water running, birds calling, wind through trees, but he could not tell where they were going. When the blindfolds came off, found himself in a hidden valley. Small wooden buildings sat among gardens and training grounds. Perhaps 50 people lived here, from young children to elderly masters. Everyone stopped what they were doing to stare at the visitors. An old man approached. He moved with a smoothness that reminded of water flowing. Despite his age, there was something dangerous about him. This had to be Master, the clan leader. "Commander," said, surprising him, "we know who you are. We know why you have come. We intercepted the Federation message 3 weeks ago." "How?" asked before he could stop himself. Smiled. "We have our methods. Just because we live apart from your modern world does not mean we are ignorant of it. We watch. We listen. We understand what happens beyond these mountains." He gestured for them to follow. They entered a simple room with mats on the floor. Tea was served, sat across from and spoke plainly. "The Federation mocks humanity. They think you are weak because you have only just reached the stars. They judge you by technology and biology. They do not understand what makes humans truly dangerous." "And what is that?" asked. "Our ability to adapt, to learn, to perfect any skill we pursue with absolute dedication." Sipped his tea. "For 8 centuries this clan has practiced the arts, not as history or tradition but as living, evolving combat disciplines. Every generation refines what the previous generation learned. We have never stopped improving. The Federation fights with advanced weapons and natural abilities," said. "How can ancient techniques compete with that?" "Because we do not just learn techniques," explained. "We train the mind to read opponents instantly, the body to move beyond normal human limits, the spirit to remain calm in any situation. We study every form of combat ever created and take the best from each. It is not defined by weapons or tools. It is defined by mastery of all aspects of warfare." Entered the room and knelt beside her master, nodded to her. "Show him," the old man said simply. They went outside to a training ground, explained what was about to see. Would attempt to infiltrate a compound, eliminate 12 guards, retrieve an object, and escape without being detected. "The guards are our advanced students," said. "Each one has trained for at least 15 years. They know we'll be coming. They are prepared." Watched carefully. The compound was a simple wooden structure surrounded by walls. The 12 guards were positioned at strategic points. They looked alert and ready. Stood at the edge of the training ground. She closed her eyes for a moment, then moved. Almost missed it. 1 second she was standing still, the next she was 20 meters away, pressed against a wall. She had crossed open ground without making a sound. One of the guards turned his head, looking right at where she should be, but somehow he did not see her. She went up and over the wall like gravity meant nothing. Inside the compound, she moved from shadow to shadow. The first guard did not even know she was there until her hand touched his neck in what assumed was a killing blow. The guard collapsed silently. It happened again and again. Was water flowing around rocks? She was wind that could not be caught. Guards fell one by one, each thinking they were alert and ready. None of them stood a chance. She retrieved the target, a small box from the center of the compound. Then she vanished. Searched for her but could not see where she went. Then pointed. Stood right behind him. She had circled around and approached from an unexpected direction. The entire operation had taken 17 minutes. "Impressive," said and meant it. "But the proving grounds are not stealth missions. They are public combat trials, face-to-face fighting." Removed her dark outer garments. Underneath, she wore lighter clothes and saw the weapons strapped to her body. Short swords, throwing blades, chains, and tools he could not identify. Stealth is a choice, said. We use it because it is effective, but have always been warriors first. We can fight in any way needed. The shadows are comfortable, but we are not limited to them. She drew a short sword and moved through a series of strikes that blurred with speed. The blade became a silver streak in the air. When she stopped, she was not even breathing hard. The question is not whether I can fight, said. The question is whether you truly want me to represent Earth. If I go to the proving grounds, I will fight to win. I will use every technique our clan has developed. Some aliens may be hurt badly. Some may die. The galaxy will see what human warriors can do. Are you ready for that? Thoughtabout's mocking laughter. He thought about the Federation species who believed humans were weak and primitive. He thought about Earth's place in the galaxy and what would happen if they failed this test. Yes, he said firmly. Earth needs to show we are not weak. We need to prove we belong among the stars. If you can do that, then I am asking you to represent all of humanity. Looked at her master, nodded slowly. Then I will go, said. Give me 1 month to prepare. I must learn to fight in conditions I have never faced. Zero gravity, alien biology, different atmospheres. I must understand my enemies before I face them. You will have everything Earth can provide, promised. Master stood and placed a hand on shoulder. Show them the price of mockery, he said quietly. Teach them to respect the warrior spirit of humanity. Bowed to her master, then too. The shadow warrior was going to war. The month passed quickly, trained in facilities that would have seemed like magic to her ancestors. She practiced fighting in zero-gravity chambers, learning how to move when there was no up or down. She studied alien anatomy, understanding where each species was vulnerable. She trained in sealed rooms with different atmospheres, adapting her breathing and movement. But she also kept her traditional training. Every morning she practiced the ancient forms. Every evening she meditated and centered her mind. The technology was new, but the principles remained the same. A warrior must know herself completely before she can defeat any enemy. Now she stood on Prime, the neutral world where the proving grounds took place. The planet existed only for Federation ceremonies and trials. Millions of aliens watched from orbital stations above. Billions more watched on screens across the galaxy. The arena was massive. It could change its shape and environment for each fight. Mountains could rise from the floor. Forests could grow in minutes. The arena could become a frozen wasteland or a burning desert or even the vacuum of space. Every fight would be different. 83 species sent champions. Walked among warriors who towered over her, who had natural armor, who could breathe fire or manipulate gravity or see in spectrums humans could not. She wore modified combat clothing that honored her clan's traditions while protecting her from environmental hazards. Her weapons were visible on her body, short swords, throwing blades, chains, and tools. The other warriors laughed. A massive four-armed reptile named Vex pointed at her swords and roared with amusement. His species was called, and they had been warriors for 5,000 years. Look at the human with her little knives. Does she plan to cut us with those toys? Others joined the mockery. A floating energy being flickered with what might have been laughter. An insect warrior clicked its mandibles in a way that made several species chuckle. Even some of the smaller warriors looked at with pity, as if she was already dead. Only a few did not laugh. A skinned warrior with 4 eyes watched her carefully, an old tortoise-like being nodded respectfully. They had seen enough combat to recognize something in the way stood in the absolute calm of her eyes. Appeared on massive screens above the arena. Welcome, warriors of the Federation. Today begins the proving grounds. You will fight until only the strongest remain. There are no rules except survival. Defeat means elimination. Victory means glory. His crystalline form turned toward where stood. And a special welcome to Earth's champion. Try to last at least one fight. We have bets on how quickly you will fall. More laughter echoed through the arena. Said nothing. She simply closed her eyes and breathed, centering herself. The first matches were announced. Names appeared on screens and warriors were transported to fighting platforms. First opponent was called a warrior. The insect-like beings were known for incredible speed. Their limbs could strike faster than most species could see, and their limbs were sharp as blades. The environment was set to an urban ruin scenario. Broken buildings and rubble provided some cover, and materialized on opposite sides of the arena. The countdown began 3, 2, 1. Attacked instantly. The insect warrior crossed 30 meters in a heartbeat, limbs striking in a blur. Each strike could cut through steel. Most opponents would be overwhelmed in seconds. Was not there. She had moved the instant the countdown ended, not backward but to the side into a blind spot. The warrior's strikes hit empty air. By the time realized had dodged, she was already moving again. Spun, mandibles clicking in confusion. Where was the human? Struck from behind. Her short sword touched a specific point on his neck, right where the neural cluster connected to the limbs. It was a precise blow, calculated from weeks of studying anatomy. His entire body locked up, paralyzed by the surgical strike to the nervous system. The insect warrior collapsed. 8 seconds had passed since the fight began. The arena fell completely silent. Millions of beings stared at the screens, not understanding what they had just seen. The announcers stammered, trying to explain. How had the human moved so fast? How had she known exactly where to strike? Sheathed her sword and bowed respectfully to her fallen opponent before being transported away. Her second fight came 3 hours later. The opponent was a species that combined biology with cybernetic enhancements. Half organic, half machine, they were incredibly difficult to defeat because they had backup systems for every vital function. Normal attacks barely slowed them down. This fight lasted longer. The whose name was approached carefully. He had watched his first fight. He knew she was dangerous. The environment was a maze of metal corridors. Tried to use his sensors to track through the walls. His cybernetic eye could see through most materials, but somehow kept disappearing from his scans. She was using the metal corridors themselves, understanding how sensor arrays worked and positioning herself where the reflections confused the readings. Master had made sure she learned about technology even if she did not rely on it. Fired energy blasts at where he thought she was. The walls exploded, metal flying everywhere, but was never where he aimed. She studied him as they fought, watched how he moved, saw where the biological parts connected to the mechanical ones. Every cybernetic enhancement had an interface point, a place where flesh met metal. Those were the weak spots. 3 minutes into the fight, struck. She used a chain weapon to entangle his legs, then moved in close. Her blade targeted the interface points, not the armor, not the flesh, but the exact places where neural connections controlled the cybernetics. His enhancements shut down one by one. His mechanical arm stopped working. His enhanced leg locked up. His sensor eye went dark. Without his cybernetic systems, he was just an ordinary being, and he knew it. He raised his one working hand in surrender. The crowd erupted, not with mockery this time, but with shock and confusion. Some species demanded to know what technology the human was using. Others insisted she must have some kind of mutation or power. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. She was just that skilled. Word spread through the arena quickly. The primitive human was not what anyone expected. Warriors who were scheduled to fight her began studying the recordings, trying to understand her techniques, but watching was not the same as facing her. Her third opponent was a manipulator from the species. These beings could control gravity in a limited area, making themselves lighter or making enemies heavier. It was an almost unbeatable advantage. Most warriors could not even move when I increased the gravity around them. The fight took place in an open desert environment. No cover, nowhere to hide. The warrior, named increased gravity around the moment the fight started. Most species would be crushed to the ground under 10 times normal gravity. Dropped, but then she moved. She had trained in increased gravity for weeks, building the strength to fight even under crushing weight. It was slow, difficult movement, but she was still mobile. Was so surprised that he hesitated. That hesitation cost him. Pulled throwing blades from her belt. In normal gravity, these weapons were dangerous. Under 10 times gravity, they became missiles when thrown. She had calculated the physics perfectly. The blade struck gravity manipulators, the organs that let him control gravitational fields. The gravity returned to normal instantly. Staggered, his advantage gone, closed the distance before he could recover. One strike ended the fight. 3 victories, 3 completely different opponents, 3 perfectly adapted strategies. The mockery had stopped. Now warriors watched with respect and fear. Some species that had been humanity's harshest critics began studying Earth's history, trying to understand where such warriors came from. In the stands, Commander watched with pride. General, who had doubted the plan, sat forward in his seat with amazement. Admiral smiled for the first time in weeks. On Earth, billions watched the streams. Humans who had felt ashamed of their place in the galaxy began to feel something else. Pride. Hope. The understanding that maybe humanity had strengths the aliens could not comprehend. In the arena, meditated between fights. She did not celebrate her victories. She did not acknowledge the cameras or the attention. She simply prepared for the next battle, the next opponent, the next challenge. The galaxy was starting to understand. They had not invited a weak species to the proving grounds. They had awakened a sleeping warrior tradition that had been perfecting the art of combat for thousands of years, and was just getting started. The second day of the proving grounds began with the field reduced to 40 warriors. Half had been eliminated. The remaining fighters were the best their species could offer. No one expected easy victories now. Faced a holographic specialist named. His species could project perfect copies of themselves, dozens at a time. The copies were so realistic that even advanced sensors could not tell which was real. Most opponents simply guessed and struck the wrong target until exhaustion made them vulnerable. The environment was a thick jungle with limited visibility. Within seconds of the fight starting, 12 identical surrounded. They all moved the same way. They all attacked together. Normal fighters would panic. Closed her eyes. Master had taught her to trust all her senses, not just sight. She listened to the subtle sounds of breathing, felt the tiny shifts in air pressure when something solid moved nearby, smelled the pheromones that living beings released. The holograms were perfect visually, but they did not breathe. They did not create the micro-movements of a living body. When struck, her blade went straight to the real, ignoring all the copies. The holographic warrior fell, stunned by her accuracy. The projections vanished. In the observation areas, military analysts from across the galaxy reviewed the recordings obsessively. How had she known? Some suspected hidden human technology. Others began to understand something more disturbing, that human senses, properly trained, could accomplish what expensive sensors could not. Her next opponent was even more dangerous. A named, whose species could predict movements by reading micro-expressions and body language. They were natural hunters who could anticipate attacks before they happened. Fighting was like fighting someone who could see the future. The arena became a frozen tundra, ice and snow everywhere. Visibility was poor. The cold would slow most species. Tracked through the storm, reading her footprints, sensing her body heat. He moved to intercept her before she even arrived, his predictions perfect. But had trained to control her body language. Every movement was deliberate. She could make her body lie, showing one intention while planning another. It was a technique called false intent, and it confused completely. He dodged attacks that never came. He defended against strikes aimed elsewhere, had turned his greatest advantage into a weakness. When she finally struck, was looking in the wrong direction entirely. 7 victories now. The crowd no longer laughed. They watched in respectful silence. Her 8th opponent was a creature of pure energy named Lux. These beings had no physical form to strike. They could pass through most materials. Weapons simply went through them without causing damage. They were considered almost impossible to defeat in combat. But energy had patterns, had studied electromagnetic fields during her preparation. She used a weapon from her arsenal, a chain with a blade on one end and a weight on the other. The chain was made of a special alloy that disrupted energy patterns when properly wielded. She spun the chain in complex patterns, creating a web that interfered with Lux's coherence. The energy being flickered and struggled to maintain form. When Lux was destabilized enough, his blade, coated with an insulating compound, delivered a strike that temporarily scattered the energy consciousness. 10 victories, 12-15. Species that had ruled the Federation watched their champions fall to the human warrior. Some became angry, demanding investigations. Others became fascinated, requesting permission to study Earth's martial traditions. Then came the fight everyone was watching for. The crystalline being who had mocked humanity's entry, the head of the War Council. His species, had never lost a trial by combat in 3,000 years. Their bodies were nearly indestructible, able to absorb and refract energy attacks. Physical strikes simply glanced off their crystalline structure. The environment was set to an energy storm scenario. Lightning-like plasma discharges erupted randomly across the arena. Each bolt carried enough power to vaporize most species. The arena was designed to test warriors' ability to fight under impossible conditions. Stood in the center, confident. His body shimmered with rainbow colors, beautiful and deadly. "This ends now, human," he said, his voice ringing like bells. "You have impressed some, but you cannot harm me. My people are beyond physical weapons." Said nothing, she observed. The plasma storm erupted. Bolts of energy struck the arena floor, creating explosions. Most warriors would try to avoid them, limiting their movement. Use this, forcing opponents into predictable patterns. But move toward the storm, not away from it. She timed her movements to the microsecond. The plasma discharges followed patterns, slight timing variations, but patterns nonetheless. She used them as cover, as distraction. When a bolt struck near her, she was already elsewhere. When expected her to dodge left, she moved right through the space where a discharge had just been. Tried to track her, but the storm made it nearly impossible. His sensors could not penetrate the energy interference. He had to rely on sight and kept the discharges between them. She studied him, watched how light moved through his crystalline body, saw the patterns of his internal structure. Everything had weaknesses, even crystal. It was about finding the fault lines, the points where stress concentrated. Struck from an angle thought was impossible, using a plasma discharge itself as cover. Her blade hit a specific point on his structure. The strike was precise, calculated. Nothing happened at first. Then she struck again, a slightly different angle, and again. Each strike hit a resonance point in his crystalline body. She was not trying to shatter him with force. She was creating vibrations that built on each other. Realized what was happening too late. Microfractures appeared in his body. They spread, following the stress lines had identified. His crystalline structure began to fail. "Impossible," said, his voice cracking like breaking glass. "You cannot know our weaknesses. We have fought every species in the Federation. No one has discovered." Another strike. The fractures cascaded. His body would not shatter, but the structural integrity was compromised. He could feel his form weakening. He yielded. The arena exploded with sound. Not just shock this time, but genuine awe. Species had been unbeatable for 3,000 years. Their champions had never lost. Warriors who had fought for centuries without finding a weakness watched as a human discovered it in 6 minutes. Lowered himself before in a gesture of respect. "You have taught me humility," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "And you have taught the Federation something we forgot. That skill can overcome any advantage." The remaining fights that day were almost irrelevant. Everyone was talking about victory over. Military strategists analyzed the fight, trying to understand the physics. Scientists studied the recordings, mapping the fracture patterns. Politicians began reassessing Earth's position in the Federation. But had one more opponent, the final challenge. Tomorrow she would face the champion. His species could manipulate pure energy, creating weapons and shields from nothing. He had won the proving grounds twice before. His power was legendary. That night meditated in her quarters. Commander wanted to speak with her to offer encouragement, but Master, who had traveled to watch the final fights, stopped him. "She does not need our words," said. "She knows what must be done. A warrior faces the final battle alone with their training and their spirit. That is enough." In the meditation, reviewed everything she had learned about. His techniques, his patterns, his preferences. Energy manipulation was powerful, but it required focus and calculation. Every weapon he created, every shield he formed, demanded his concentration. The key was not to fight his power directly. The key was to overwhelm his ability to focus. She thought of her weapons. Each one served multiple purposes. Shuriken were not just throwing blades, they could be distractions, anchors for wire traps, or create specific sounds. Smoke compounds did not just obscure vision, they confused sensors and changed air pressure. Even her clothing could be torn into strips for binding or misdirection. A never had just one plan. Every tool had 10 uses. Every technique could adapt to any situation. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn the final lesson. That the greatest weapon was not power, but the mind that wielded it. The final day arrived. The entire Galactic Federation watched. Over 2 trillion beings across hundreds of worlds tuned in to see the conclusion of the proving grounds. The human who had defeated champion after champion now faced her ultimate test. Was everything his reputation promised? He stood 3 meters tall, his body covered in scales that shimmered with energy. His species, had been warriors before most civilizations existed. They could create swords of pure energy, shields that blocked any attack, even projectiles that struck with the force of missiles, all from their own power. The final arena was deliberately simple, a flat platform surrounded by void. No cover, no environmental effects, just 2 warriors and their skills. There was nowhere to hide, no tricks of terrain. This would be a pure contest of ability. Millions of humans watched from Earth. In bars and homes, in public squares and military bases, people gathered around screens. Many prayed, some cried, all of them hoped. In the hidden valley, Master watched with his clan. The old Master's face showed no emotion, but his hands were folded in a position of meditation. He believed incompletely, but he also knew that belief did not guarantee victory. The countdown began. Wasted no time. The moment the fight started, he created 2 energy blades and charged. Each weapon could cut through starship hulls. Combined with his strength and speed, he was a force of destruction. Dodged, she did not try to block or parry. Fighting his energy weapons directly would be suicide. Instead, she moved in ways that made him adjust his attacks, burning through his energy reserves slightly faster. Expected this. He had studied her fights. He knew she would try to avoid direct confrontation, but he had an answer. He created energy shields around himself, making close combat impossible. Then he began firing energy bolts from his hands. The bolts came fast, tracking his movements. Each one exploded where it struck. The platform became a field of blasts. There was no cover, no way to hide. Pulled items from her belt as she ran. Shuriken flew through the air, not at but around him. They embedded in the platform floor in specific patterns, barely noticed. What threat were small metal stars to someone who could manipulate pure energy? Then through a smoke compound. It exploded between her and creating a dense cloud, smiled behind his energy shield. The smoke meant nothing. His sensors could track her through it. But the smoke was not just smoke. It was a conductive compound that interfered with energy fields. Sensors flickered. His shields wavered slightly. For just a moment, his perfect control was disrupted. Through thin wires, they connected the shuriken she had positioned earlier, creating a nearly invisible web across the platform. Then she moved. Fired through the smoke, trusting his sensors. But his sensors were lying to him now, the conductive smoke creating false readings. His energy bolt struck empty air. Emerged from a different angle. She threw more shuriken, forcing to track multiple objects. His energy shields moved to intercept, but each interception cost him focus and power. The fight became a dance, would attack and would create new complications. More smoke, more wires, flashbang compounds that disrupted energy fields. Each tool served multiple purposes. The shuriken were weapons but also parts of traps. The smoke obscured vision but also conducted electricity. The wires could trip or bind or channel energy in unexpected ways. Realized what was happening. She was not fighting his power directly. She was overwhelming his ability to focus. He had to track her movements, manage his energy shields, watch for thrown weapons, account for the wires and smoke, and all the other variables she kept introducing. For someone who relied on perfect control of energy, it was like trying to juggle while fighting. Clever, admitted, his voice strained, but not enough. He gathered his power and released a massive wave of energy in all directions. Everything on the platform would be destroyed, the wires, the smoke, all of his preparations, and probably herself. But had expected this. She had been guiding him toward it. When someone has overwhelming power, they eventually use it all at once. It was predictable. She dove and rolled, getting as low to the platform as possible. The energy wave passed over her, close enough to singe her clothing, but she survived. And was now exhausted, creating that much energy had drained him. His shields flickered and failed. For the first time in the fight, he was vulnerable. Moved faster than she had the entire battle. She closed the distance in seconds. Her blade was coated with the same conductive compound from her smoke. When she struck, it channeled its own residual energy back through his body. His energy matrix disrupted. The power that made him so dangerous turned against him. Collapsed, his systems overloaded. The platform fell silent. Then the arena erupted. Every warrior present rose to their feet in salute, a gesture that transcended species and culture. It was the traditional sign of respect for a warrior who had proven themselves beyond all doubt. Bowed too, helping him to his feet. The champion looked at her with genuine respect. "I have fought for 200 years," said quietly. "You are the finest warrior I have ever faced, not the strongest, not the most powerful, but the most skilled." The Federation Council appeared on screens across the arena, spoke, and his voice held no mockery now, only acknowledgement. "Earth has proven itself. Commander, your species is granted full membership in the Galactic Federation with all rights and privileges. Furthermore, we formally request that Earth establish a combat academy to share your warrior traditions with other species." The announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Earth had gone from the bottom of the hierarchy to a position of respect in one tournament. Species that had looked down on humanity now sought alliances and partnerships. But the greatest changes took longer to manifest. Commander became Admiral, appointed to lead Earth's first orbital defense command. He would coordinate humanity's military with Federation forces, a position of trust and authority. General was given responsibility for the new combat academy. Within months, instructors from across Earth, not just but masters of countless martial traditions, began teaching students from hundreds of worlds. Aliens learned that human combat arts were not primitive superstition, but sophisticated sciences of warfare. The Federation's military doctrine began to shift. For centuries, they had focused only on technology and genetic advantages. Now they understood that training, discipline, and tactical thinking could overcome raw power. Earth's example inspired other species to revive their own ancient warrior traditions. Returned to the Hidden Valley. She declined offers of rank, wealth, and fame. She refused interviews and speaking engagements. Master explained to disappointed officials that this was the way to serve without seeking glory, to achieve victory, and then return to the shadows. But did make one compromise. She agreed to train a new generation of warriors who understood both the old ways and the new reality. The Hidden Valley began accepting students from across Earth, carefully selected individuals who would carry forward the traditions. 1 year later, visited his daughter. The valley had changed. Young recruits trained alongside traditional students. Some came from military backgrounds. Others were simply dedicated individuals seeking to perfect themselves. But the core remained the same. Every morning began with meditation. Every technique was practiced until it became instinct. Every student learned that the greatest weapon was not in their hand, but in their mind. Stood on a mountain overlook watching the sunset, Master joined her. "The galaxy respects us now," said, "but respect can fade. We must remain vigilant." "True," agreed, "but you have given them something more valuable than fear. You have given them understanding. They know now that humanity has depth they never suspected. That makes them curious about what else they might have missed." Above the valley, human and alien ships patrolled together. Species that had been enemies now trained side by side. Earth's martial academies hosted students from across the Federation, all seeking to understand the human approach to warfare. In the Federation Council chambers, discussions about humanity shifted. They no longer asked if humans belonged among the stars. Now they asked what humanity could teach them. What other insights had this young species developed during their long isolation? Stood beside his daughter and smiled. "You changed the galaxy." Shook her head slightly. "I simply showed them what they had forgotten, that the warrior's spirit cannot be measured by technology or biology, that discipline and training can achieve what raw power cannot, that humans, for all our physical limitations, have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war." She looked at her father. "Every species has strengths. We showed them ours, not weapons or ships or genetic advantages, but the ability to take any challenge and master it through dedication and intelligence." Master placed his hand on shoulder. "They proved their worth in a time when the world no longer believed in them. You carried the honor of 800 years of tradition, and you reminded the galaxy that true warriors are defined not by what they are born with, but by what they choose to become." Far above, in space stations and distant worlds, young humans watched recordings of fights. They saw what was possible when skill met dedication. Many decided to pursue martial training. Others chose different paths but carried the lesson with them, that humans could excel at anything they committed to fully. Earth's place in the galaxy was secure, not because of technology or numbers or political maneuvering, but because one warrior stepped into an arena and proved that humanity deserved respect. The sun set over the Hidden Valley. Training would continue tomorrow. New students would arrive. The traditions would be passed forward, and somewhere in the vast galaxy beyond, warriors of 100 species would study human techniques and understand that they had much to learn. They had taught the galaxy an ancient truth in a new age. Never underestimate the warrior who has spent a lifetime perfecting their art. Never dismiss the species that has spent learning to overcome any obstacle. And never, ever mock Earth's warriors until you have faced them in battle. Because when a steps into the arena, the outcome is already decided by years of preparation, centuries of tradition, and the unbreakable spirit of a warrior who knows no other way to live.